What's up everybody, back with another raid guide, and today we're taking a look at Fatescribe Roh-kalo on Mythic difficulty. I'll be going over most of the mechanics, how to deal with them, and our overall tactic for this fight. Now don't forget to check out my Twitch, there's progress raids on Mondays and Tuesdays. So, Fatescribe. Setup wise, it's pretty straightforward, just 2 tanks, 4 to 5 healers, and 13 to 14 DPS. Now we 5 heal this for our first kill, but a lot of DPS checks gets easier if you 4 heal it. But if you can consistently make the DPS checks with 5 healers, it is for sure safer, and also why we went for it. But more on the DPS stuff in a bit. Now with that said, what's new for Fatescribe on Mythic? Starting off, we have the Grim Portent. Fatescribe binds several players to runes. Now these runes will have a black circle around them, and players afflicted by Grim Portent needs to soak the rune they are bound to. Now these players will see a big swirly dark mass above their own rune. 10 players get Grim Portent, 10 runes get a circle around them. Each player goes to the rune they're bound to by checking for the dark swirly masses. Miss the soak one and it's pretty much a wipe. Next out is the Call of Eternity. Anytime Call of Eternity goes boom boom, either by dropping off bombs or when they echo, 5 fate fragments spawn per detonation. And if you get hit by a fragment, you take a ton of damage and you get slowed. And you can use freedoms to soak these whenever there's a lot of them. Freedom makes you immune to them during its effect. You take no damage, you don't get slowed. Now other than that, in phase 1, if it drags on a bit, you can get a triple beam, meaning up to 3 fated conjunctions back to back. But with this strat, it's something you really shouldn't get or you're very behind on damage. But wait, there's more. In phase 2, you now get exposed threads of fate. When a player activates a rune, a beam spawns between that rune and the boss. If you get hit by it, you get a very nasty dot that deals a ton of damage. Will most likely end up killing you. On top of this, the 2 big adds you killed during phase 2 are now uninterruptible, which means range will have to max range the adds and melee will have to outrange or line of sight it. Now with that said, let's break down the fight a bit. Starting with the main Mythic mechanics, and then I'll go over the fight as a whole. Starting off with Grim Portent, the most important thing here is locating your rune and getting to it fast. You have 9 seconds in total to get there, and it can be on the opposite side of the room, far in the back. So make sure to save mobility cooldowns for this. Other than that, there really isn't much to it. You get Grim Portent, you drop everything, and you get to whichever rune has the swirly thing above it. You're most likely going to need to stop DPS for a very long time here, so AFKing for 12 seconds while dealing with mechanics really isn't a bad thing here. Do the mechanics! Next out is phase 2, which is the rune assignments and the exposed threads of fate. Now like I mentioned, all runes while active will have a beam between them and the boss, so the big brain strat here is if all runes start moving pretty much at the same time and you rarely if ever stop, then the beams doesn't matter. So that's exactly what we did. But let's break it down a bit. Cue the picture! Now the first thing you want to keep in mind, everyone solos their own rune, meaning regardless of where your rune starts, you solo it, because as long as you start moving your rune as soon as it is possible to move it, you will always have time to finish it. And there is 0 gain in doing runes super fast, as you want to finish it just before the time runs out. So to assign this, we used a weakauras, which I will link in the descriptions. A lot of you have probably already used this for Heroic Fatescribe, but for anyone who hasn't seen or used it, you can set it up to assign a prior list for moving runes in phase 2. So you put in X amount of players into it, and when phase 2 start, it assigns players with Runic affinity according to that prior list to a mark. And each ring or circle has a mark. And for the weakauras, these marks are square, moon, triangle, diamond, circle, and star. So if you get, for example, star mark above your head, you're in charge of the star marked circle and its rune. Now setup wise for this, we made sure we had all melee as a prio in this list, because range is just better for the adds during phase 2. But other than that, it doesn't matter greatly who does it. Now for the exposed threads of fate, like I mentioned earlier, all moving runes will have a beam going between them and the boss. So to make sure this isn't an issue, players that get assigned to move the ring by the weakauras needs to be close to the rune. Just a few seconds before you can actually move them, and then you just have a countdown. 3, 2, 1, everyone steps onto the rune at roughly the same time, and then beams are never an issue. Try to be on the outer edge of your own rune to make sure you don't step into the beam that goes from your rune to boss by accident. And apart from that, keep in mind that freedom makes you immune to fate fragments, which are the orbs flying around everywhere. So players doing the innermost rings at least, and runes should call for freedoms if there's a ton of orbs in their way so they don't need to move out of the rune all the time. You can also have somebody immune soak a ton of them, like put a paladin dead center and just bubble soak all the orbs for a few seconds. Now with those out of the way, let's go over the fight step by step. The idea behind this strat is to skip a few mechanics by pushing, then holding DPS, and to burn boss in the final phase before we need to do the rune spinning. Skipping that entirely by just ignoring it. So all of this will be from that point of view. Now for phase 1 and subsequent phase 1s, the goal is to push just before the third tank ad spawns. This gives you ample time to clean up first and second tank ads and get pretty much all your healing cooldowns and DPS cooldowns back for the next phase 1 and for the final burn, which is vital. So on pull, we tank boss roughly where he is, raid stacked behind boss, use all DPS cooldowns on pull, and the goal is to get Fatescribe to 72% as fast as possible, then fully stop damage. Woohoo! When the boss reaches 72%, it will stop casting bombs and beams, so if possible you want to hit the 72% mark before the second bomb, because those overlaps with beams, so skipping them makes everything so much easier. Now when you get your first tank ad, make sure it's dropped off a bit outside of the raid and that you get it slowed instantly. Do not full nuke this ad, just dot it and cleave off from boss when ad is in range of cleave. Tank, just kite the ad round and round the boss so it's in melee range, and you want it to die like 2-3 seconds before the second tank ad spawns. So don't waste damage on it, just tunnel boss and cleave it down, but do make sure it dies before the second one spawns or you're gonna wipe. And move boss to the middle of the room a few seconds before Grimportant to make it easier to reach the runes all around the room. And if you get Grimportant, your only priority and focus should be to soak your rune. Fail and it's a wipe. Call of Eternity bombs you just put out of the raid. Soak fragments with freedom if they're about to get into the raid. When boss hits 72%, you want everyone to full stop DPS, smash that escape key, don't touch the boss, and instead focus on cleaning up any ads and tank ads that are up. We usually hit 72% around the time the second tank got invoked Destiny, which is the ad spawning mechanic. Anyways, other tank taunt off and instantly drags boss away from everyone, and the rest of the raid cleaned up any ads that were alive. So if your timing is like ours, you won't touch the boss for around 40 seconds. So you need to stretch those 2% really thin. A tank alone smacking away with today's gear can do those 2%, so please take that to heart. Stop DPS on boss, smack the ads instead, or roll your thumbs or whatever. Now for phase 2, make sure you have your rune assignment set up as mentioned earlier, and players assigned move close to your rune, move on top at the same time, call for freedom if there's a lot of fragments in your way. You also want to assign 1 or 2 healers to move along the rings and heal the people doing it, just to make sure they don't die. And for you tanks, pick up both the big ads and pull them near this brazier bonfire looking thingy, and whenever they start casting despair, both melee and tanks just move around it in line of sight. The ads do not move once they've started casting, and despair really hurts, so avoiding it even as a tank helps a ton with healing. Range and healers just need to max range it so 25 yards away from both ads and you won't get hit by it. We used no major DPS cooldowns whatsoever on these ads during phase 2. They just need to die before the phase ends and will most likely die a few seconds earlier than they have to. Now apart from this, make sure that you don't finish the rune spinning too soon. Again, getting cooldowns back, that's what it's all about. We assign 1 circle to always get their rune next to its drop-off point, then AFK and wait. For us this was star. So whichever player that got assigned star would have been in charge of finishing the phase more or less. Get the rune close, move out, AFK when there's a few seconds left before you all die horribly, push in the rune. Mind you, don't go and min-max the crap out of it. The runes can be a bit slow sometimes, and it's a really dumb way to wipe when all you gain is 1 or 2 more seconds. So yeah, just push it in when there's a few seconds left and it's fine. You just don't want to finish the runes with 15 seconds left. There's no use in that. And when you get out of phase 2, it's phase 1 all over again. Nothing changes. Play it exactly how you play it on pull and you're good. The only difference is that you now get to get the boss to 42% to stop bombs and beams. Otherwise it's exactly the same. And shockingly, so is next phase 2 as well. Play it the same way as previously described and you're good. Now for phase 3 on the other hand, there's even less to do. Now as I mentioned before, the whole strat for phase 3 is kill boss before you have to do anything. Or well, you don't have to do the rings. Now if you've successfully delayed the previous phase 1 and phase 2 as much as possible, you should have all DPS cooldowns ready after the first beam and bomb in phase 3 or very shortly after that. So after first beam and bomb, pop Bloodlust, all DPS cooldowns, second combat pot, healers make sure to spank away, just 100% tunnel boss. Make sure to spawn the first tank ad far away from the raid and make sure it gets instantly slowed. This is just to give the tank a few extra seconds to DPS the boss before having to kite around in a circle. Don't nuke the ad, don't cleave the ad. The ad is just there to look cool, there's nothing else. Do not let its promises of pad distract you from your true purpose, which is rank 1 boss damage. And yeah, that's pretty much it. You have around a minute 20 seconds from start of phase 3 until the raid goes boom boom. And the only mechanic you get is 1 set of beam and bombs, then nothing but boss. Keep in mind though, doing this sort of burn in order to skip the rune mechanic in phase 3 is not the only way. You can also just do the rune spinning in phase 3 and get more time. But the trade-off is having to deal with more potential wipe mechanics right at the end. So if possible, I really recommend going for the push. It makes it so much simpler. And I really don't think it's a super hard DPS check to make with today's gear. Now if you have any questions at all about this encounter, hit me up in the comments or become a patron or Twitch sub and get access to the Stankie Discord where you can find raid weakauras, healing notes, timings, etc. and a lot of awesome people who can help you out with anything raiding related. Don't forget the usual stuff like, comment, subscribe and ring that notification bell. It really helps me out. I'm also streaming all of our progression on Twitch, so make sure to check that out. It's on Mondays and Tuesdays. Thanks for watching and I will see you next time.